Through a smoky haze, Kirk stared at the scene in incredulous horror. These were the girls who had disappeared, and whose escorts had been found so brutally murdered. The freshest and loveliest girls in the whole country, and now they were somehow transformed into slathering, lustful beasts. Queens of Beauty and Horror by George Edson. The music stopped, and Kirk reluctantly let Joan Wendell out of his arms. Then, glancing down at her, he saw her face. "Hey, what's the matter, honey?" Those lovely features, which had been judged the most perfect in the nation, were twisted by an uneasy frown. "Let's sit down, Kirk," she said that quickly, taking his arm. "People keep staring at me. And over there, an old man." She gave a wince of revulsion. "He's looking at me as if he actually owned me." Kirk tightened his lips, shot an angry glare around the tiny dance floor of the nightclub. He knew well enough what she meant. He'd seen men staring at her, first at her face, then at her gracefully shaped body, and he'd already socked a couple for what had been in their eyes. Suddenly, he spotted the old man she had mentioned, a shrunken, toothless creature who had too long cheated the grave. He was looking at her as if he actually owned her. "By heaven, I'll—" "No, please, Kirk." Joan clutched his arm harder and tried to draw him toward their table. "Don't have any trouble. Just let's sit down." He let out a slow breath, relaxed with an effort. "Okay, honey. Well, that's the price of being a beauty queen," he muttered with a grimace as he sat down beside her. "Getting the eye in a pleasure city like this, where guys have only one idea in their heads." Joan's gaze lifted swiftly. There was a hurt look on her face. "You know I never wanted to be a beauty queen, Kirk." Her voice was low, a little unsteady. "You know I was forced into the contest by the managing editor. And at the time you were all for it yourself." "Yeah, I know," Kirk said bitterly. "I guess I was just so damned proud of you I wanted to show you off. I didn't think what that meant." Joan's eyes glistened with tears. "That's all I ever cared," she told him. "To have you think I was beautiful. That's all I ever wanted." Kirk looked at her quickly, swallowed. He reached for one of her hands and pressed it. "Sweet kid," he murmured huskily. Then, straightening and grinning, "Let's forget all this muck. After the banquet tomorrow night, we can trek back home. In another month, your contract to be a newspaper reporter will run out, and you can sign a new one. To slave for me, as my wife. Let's just think of that. Joan forced a responsive smile, but it didn't last. In a moment, the same uneasiness, an uneasiness which bordered on fear, began to show through. "Oh, I wish we didn't have to wait. I wish we were going tonight." Her free hand clenched the knotted handkerchief. "I can't help feeling those eyes everywhere. They stare at me all the time." "Those eyes?" Kirk was stiff again, his lean face hard. "What do you mean? Whose?" I don't know. Nobody's in particular. Just eyes. Horrible, evil eyes. I even feel them looking through the window when I'm in my room." Kirk relaxed. The hard lines in his face softened. "But your room's up 5 stories, dear, and there isn't any fire escape on your end. You haven't actually seen a snooper at the window, have you?" "No, there's never anything there when I look, but then a minute later I seem to feel them again." She shivered. "Oh, I know I'm foolish. I know nobody could get to my windows, and yet—" "Sure, honey, I understand," Kirk said gently. "It's just your imagination playing tricks on you. Why shouldn't it, though, after you've watched rotten eyes peer at you all day? You're tired, too. That'd help. What do you say we take you right home for some sleep as soon as Ruth and Morgan show up?" Joan nodded in relieved acquiescence. But it wasn't quite as easy as that. When Ruth Dennis, another girl who had been in the beauty contest, and Jed Morgan, a reporter who had been covering the event, returned to the table from the dance floor, they brought along a couple of men. Kirk and Joan had to wait a bit to chat with them before leaving. One, chubby and red-faced, was Frank Pollard, promoter of the beauty contest in Island City. He was a little high. "Biggest show they've ever had in this burg," he crowed. 48 most beautiful girls in the country. 48 of them. But one much more beautiful than all the rest. The other, a reporter named Gil Goring, said softly. He was a thin man with a dissipated face and sardonic eyes. The eyes were on Joan. "Will the queen deign to dance with the humble scribe?" Joan said, "We were just going home, Gil. I'm sorry." "Sorry." Goring shook his head. "I'm afraid the sorrow's all mine, but I couldn't really expect a dance with me to hold any inducement when you're bound for a private rendezvous with young Lochinvar here." Kirk glanced sharply around. He had never particularly cared for the reporter from Chicago, and he didn't like the insinuation in the last remark. "Miss Wendell's my fiancée, Goring," he said in a tight voice. Goring shrugged his shoulders in a tragic gesture, murmured, "And she could have so much." Kirk flushed angrily, then felt Joan's hand on his arm and held himself back. Now, boys," Pollard the promoter said in a placating tone. "Let's not have any squabbles. Everything's in fun. All just good sport." He glanced toward the dance floor where, with the orchestra playing again, several of the beauty contestants were dancing. "Man, what a collection of honeys." "A great time for a bunch of rich playboys," Jed Morgan laughed. "Or a bunch of degenerates," Goring suggested. "The kind with X-ray eyes and—" "Please, Gil," Joan begged. At the mention of eyes, she had stiffened against Kirk. Her hand tightened convulsively on his arm. "Sorry," Goring said with a sardonic expression of apology. Kirk glowered at him, then looked around at the others. "We've got to be going along," he told them. "Joan's tired. You staying, Jed?" Morgan glanced at his girl, Ruth Dennis. She nodded, and he said to Kirk, "Yeah, I guess we'll be staying a while." "Okay. Well, so long." Rising, Kirk helped Joan from the booth. But that was as far as they got. A sudden shrill scream rose above the sound of the music. A girl whom Kirk recognized as one of the beauty contestants, her face a white blotch of terror, came running wildly out of the ladies' room. Something horrible tried to come in the window to get me,